My name is Claire Thompson, and for most of my life, I believed loyalty was something you earned by enduring pain quietly. I grew up in a small Ohio town where family reputation mattered more than truth, and appearances were treated like oxygen. I was the eldest daughter, the responsible one, the one everyone leaned on when things went wrong. By 25, I was already divorced, raising my son Noah alone, working double shifts as a paralegal, and saving every spare dollar with one clear goal: stability, not luxury, not revenge, just safety. I kept my savings in a joint account with my stepfather, Mark, a man who'd raised me since I was 10 and who insisted it was for protection. He said it would help if anything happened to me. I believed him because I wanted to believe someone older knew better than I did. Over 12 years, that account grew to 14,300 vet. Money represented missed vacations, secondhand furniture, birthdays spent working late, and 1,000 small sacrifices Noah would never remember, but I would never forget. One Thursday morning, while waiting in line for coffee before work, I checked my banking app like I always did, or then. The balance didn't load at first. I refreshed. Then I felt my stomach drop so fast I thought I might faint. The account balance read $0. No warning. No partial withdrawal. One transaction. Authorized transfer. Mark's name. I stood there shaking while people behind me complained about the line. My hands were numb. I walked out without my coffee, sat in my car, and stared at the steering wheel until my vision blurred. I didn't cry. Not yet. I drove straight to Mark and my mother's house. When Mark opened the door, he didn't look surprised. He looked annoyed. "You weren't supposed to find out yet," he said. Like I'd walked in on a surprise party instead of discovering my life savings were gone. My mother stood behind him, arms crossed. "It was a family decision," she said calmly. "Your brother needed help. You'll understand someday." That was the moment something inside me went quiet. Not broken, not angry, just focused. Because I finally understood something they never expected me to understand. They didn't think I would fight back. And they were very, very wrong. They told me the story like it was already settled. Like my role was to absorb it and move on. My younger brother Ethan had business problems. Bad investments. A failing startup. Creditors calling. Mark said the money was just sitting there, and that I was strong enough to rebuild. My mother nodded along, adding that family helps family, and that Noah was young, he had time. They didn't ask. They didn't warn me. They decided. When I asked how much they took, Mark shrugged. All of it. It was cleaner that way. I remember noticing how clean their kitchen looked. New countertops. Fresh paint. The irony wasn't lost on me. I left without raising my voice, without threatening, without tears. That scared them more than yelling would have. That night, after putting Noah to bed, I opened my laptop and began pulling every document I had. Bank statements, deposit histories, emails, texts, where Mark had referred to the account as Noah's safety net. Notes from years ago where my mother praised me for being so responsible with his future. By 2 a.m., my dining table was covered in paper. By 3 a.m., I had a plan. The next day, I called the bank. Yes, legally, Mark had access. No, they couldn't reverse the transfer. But yes, they could provide records. Detailed ones. I requested everything. Then I called a lawyer. Her name was Denise Carter, and she specialized in financial abuse cases. She didn't interrupt while I spoke. When I finished, she said one sentence that changed everything. Just because someone can take your money doesn't mean they're allowed to keep it. Over the next week, I learned things my family never thought I'd uncover. The money hadn't gone directly to Ethan. It had been routed through Mark's LLC, then split. Some paid off Ethan's debts. Some paid for a new truck. Some funded a vacation Mark and my mother were planning for their anniversary. Denise explained it carefully. This wasn't just betrayal. It was misappropriation. It was unjust enrichment. And depending on intent, it bordered on fraud. I didn't confront them again. I didn't warn them. I let them think I was quiet because I was weak. Meanwhile, Denise filed motions, froze accounts, and sent formal requests for documentation. I kept going to work. I packed Noah's lunches. I smiled at family dinners. And all the while, I watched them spend my money like it had never belonged to me. Revenge isn't loud at first. It's patient. It's paperwork. It's timing. And it's letting people underestimate you long enough to hang themselves with their own confidence. The first crack appeared when Mark got a certified letter at dinner. I watched his face change as he read it. Pale, tight. My mother asked what it was. He didn't answer. That night, I received 6 missed calls. I didn't pick up. The next morning, Ethan showed up in my apartment, frantic, insisting he didn't know the money came from me. He said Mark told him it was family savings. I believed Ethan. He was reckless, not cruel. Mark was both. Denise advised me not to engage emotionally. Let the legal process speak. So I did. Over the next month, subpoenas went out, bank records came back, and the story my family told each other began to collapse. The judge granted a temporary injunction freezing Mark's business accounts. Suddenly, bills weren't getting paid. Vendors called. The truck was repossessed. My mother accused me of tearing the family apart. I told her calmly that the family cracked the moment they decided my child's future was optional. At mediation, Mark tried to charm the room. He talked about intent, about helping Ethan, about how I'd always landed on my feet before. Denise slid a printed spreadsheet across the table. Every deposit I'd made, every transfer he'd authorized, every personal expense he'd paid with my savings. The mediator didn't smile. The settlement negotiations were brutal. Mark offered partial repayment over time. Denise declined. We wanted restitution, interest, legal fees, and acknowledgement. In the end, faced with criminal exposure, Mark agreed. He liquidated assets, sold the truck, drained retirement accounts. The final amount wired into a new account in my name alone was $158,000. More than I'd lost. Less than what it cost him in pride. The judge's final words still echo in my mind. Family trust is not a blank check. Afterward, my mother didn't speak to me for months. Ethan apologized publicly. Mark avoided eye contact whenever we crossed paths. And me? I slept better than I had in years. Not because I won money back, but because I proved something to myself. That strength doesn't mean enduring injustice quietly. Sometimes it means standing so firmly in the truth that the people who wronged you can't escape it. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't destroy them socially. I let their own choices do that. And that kind of revenge lasts longer than anger ever could. Winning the settlement didn't magically fix everything, but it changed the power balance in ways my family wasn't prepared for. For the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting to their decisions, I was controlling my own narrative. The money went into a new account under my name only, with strict protections, and a college trust set up for Noah that no one else could touch. When I signed those documents, my hands shook. Not from fear, but from relief. I hadn't just reclaimed money. I had reclaimed agency. The fallout, however, came fast. My mother began telling anyone who would listen that I had chosen money over family. She cried to relatives, to church friends, to neighbors who remembered me as the polite girl who never caused trouble. Some believed her. Some didn't. What surprised me was how little I cared. Years ago, that judgment would have crushed me. Now it felt like background noise. Mark tried to reach out once, sending a long email about forgiveness and moving forward. He wrote that he hoped I could let go of bitterness. I didn't reply. Forgiveness without accountability is just permission for the next betrayal. And I was done granting that. Ethan, to his credit, paid back the portion of money that had gone directly to him, even though legally he wasn't required to. We met for coffee one afternoon, both of us quieter than we used to be. I didn't know, he said again, eyes red. But I should have asked questions. I nodded. That was the truth. Silence protects the wrong people. As months passed, the story shifted in the family. Whispers replaced accusations. A cousin told me privately that Mark had done something similar years ago with an aunt's inheritance. Another admitted my mother had pressured her into loans she never got back. My case cracked something open. It gave language to experiences everyone had been taught to minimize. At work, I was promoted. At home, Noah slept better, sensing the tension had eased. One night, while helping him with homework, he asked, "Mom, are we okay now?" I swallowed hard and smiled. "Yes," I said. "We are, and I meant it." Revenge didn't look like fireworks or shouting. It looked like stability. It looked like quiet evenings, bills paid on time, and a future no one could steal without consequences. I didn't celebrate publicly. I didn't gloat. I simply lived better. And that, I learned, is sometimes the most unsettling outcome for people who expected you to stay small. Time has a strange way of revealing who people really are once the drama fades. About a year after the settlement, my mother reached out not with an apology, but with an invitation to talk things through. We met at a neutral cafe halfway between our homes. She looked older, tired. The confidence she once wore like armor now cracked at the edges. She talked first, circling the truth without touching it. How hard things had been. How stressed Mark was. How she never meant for it to go so far. I listened, hands wrapped around my coffee, waiting. Eventually, she said the words I'd expected. "I still don't understand why you couldn't. Just let it go." I looked at her, then really looked. "Because if I had," I said calmly, "you would have learned that you can take from me without consequence. And I couldn't teach my son that." She frowned, as if the idea offended her. In that moment, I realized reconciliation wasn't possible, not because of anger, but because of values. We wanted different things. She wanted comfort without accountability. I wanted boundaries with integrity. We parted politely, but distantly. Low contact became no contact. And my life grew quieter, not emptier. Noah thrived. I finished law school part-time. Inspired by Denise and what I'd learned about financial abuse, I started volunteering with a local nonprofit that helped women untangle themselves from similar situations. Every story was different, but the pattern was the same. Someone trusted the wrong person because love had been used as leverage. One evening after a workshop, a woman pulled me aside and said, "Hearing you made me realize I'm not crazy. I'm allowed to say no." I went home and cried, not from pain, but from the weight of how many of us are taught to swallow injustice in the name of family. Mark eventually filed for bankruptcy. My mother moved into a smaller apartment. The world didn't end. The sky didn't fall. What did end was their ability to control me through guilt. And that freedom was worth every uncomfortable conversation, every sideways glance at family gatherings I no longer attended. Revenge didn't turn me bitter. It made me honest. It stripped away the version of myself that thought endurance was the same as strength. I stopped apologizing for protecting what I built. I stopped explaining myself to people committed to misunderstanding me. And most importantly, I stopped confusing love with obligation. Looking back, I don't feel triumph. I feel clarity. And clarity is something no one can steal from you. People often ask me if I'd do it all again, if given the choice. They expect hesitation, regret, maybe a softened answer about family bonds. But the truth is simple. Yes, every time. Because what I learned wasn't just how to fight back. It was how to recognize my own worth. The betrayal hurt deeply, but it also forced me to confront a lifetime of conditioning that told me my role was to sacrifice quietly and smile while doing it. Once that illusion broke, I couldn't unsee it. Noah's older now. He knows parts of the story, enough to understand that trust is earned, not assumed, and that boundaries are not punishments, they're protections. When he asked once why we don't visit Grandma anymore, I told him the truth in age-appropriate words. Sometimes, people you love make choices that aren't safe for you. And loving yourself means stepping back, he nodded, accepting it more easily than adults ever do. Watching him grow up without the weight of that dysfunction feels Like the real victory, the money helped, of course. It paid for stability, for education, for breathing room, but the real revenge wasn't financial. It was generational. I broke a cycle. I refused to pass down the lesson that women exist to absorb damage for the sake of peace. I taught my son that accountability matters no matter who you are. Sometimes, late at night, I think about the version of myself who stood in that coffee shop, staring at a zero balance, heart pounding, unsure if she'd survive what came next. I wish I could tell her that she doesn't just survive, she transforms. She becomes someone her younger self would be proud of. If you're reading this and wondering whether standing up for yourself is worth the fallout, here's what I know now. The people who benefit from your silence will always call your voice betrayal. Let them. Your future is louder than their accusations. And revenge, real revenge, isn't about ruining someone else's life. It's about refusing to let them ruin yours ever again. The strangest part of everything that followed was how ordinary life became once the storm passed. I had expected some dramatic aftershock, a moment where I'd feel either victorious or devastated. But instead there was calm, real calm, the kind that comes from knowing no one can reach into your life anymore and rearrange it without your permission. I settled into routines that felt earned rather than imposed. Morning walks with Noah, quiet weekends, budget planning that no longer carried a knot of fear in my chest. And yet, every now and then, reminders surfaced. An extended relative would message me out of the blue, trying to check in, their curiosity thinly disguised as concern. I learned to answer politely and briefly, giving nothing away. My story was no longer community property. One afternoon, nearly 2 years after everything happened, I received an unexpected email from Mark. It was shorter than the last one. Stripped of excuses, almost sterile. He wrote that losing his business, his savings, and his reputation had forced him to reflect, that he finally understood why I'd done what I did, that he hoped one day I'd forgive him. I read it twice, then closed my laptop without replying. Forgiveness is not a response. You owe someone just because they feel uncomfortable living with the consequences of their actions. Around that time, I was invited to speak at a small legal seminar about financial abuse within families. Standing at the podium, I realized how many faces in the room mirrored the version of me that once believed silence was survival. I told them what no one had told me early enough, that manipulation wrapped in love is still manipulation, and that the law exists not just for strangers, but for moments when family crosses lines that should never be crossed. After the talk, a young woman approached me shaking. "My aunt controls my trust fund," she whispered. "Everyone says I should be grateful." I gave her Denise's card and told her something I wish someone had told me sooner. Gratitude doesn't require surrender. That night, Noah asked why people clapped when I spoke. I laughed softly and said, "Because sometimes telling the truth helps other people be brave." I thought about that, then smiled. "I like brave," he said. "Me too." I realized then that my revenge had quietly evolved into something else. It wasn't about what I'd taken back. It was about what I'd given forward. I map out of silence, a reminder that even when the people who hurt you share your blood, you're still allowed to protect yourself, especially then. Years later, when Noah packed his bags for college, I felt a wave of emotion so strong it nearly knocked the breath from my lungs. Not just pride, but vindication in its purest form. We stood in his dorm room, surrounded by boxes and mismatched furniture, and he hugged me tightly before his roommate arrived. "You did all this," he said quietly. I shook my head. "We did," I corrected, because that was the truth. Resilience is rarely a solo act. As I drove away from campus, I thought about the road that led us here, about how close we'd come to losing everything, because I'd trusted the wrong people with access to my life. I thought about my mother, who I now saw only in old photographs, or through secondhand updates from distant relatives. She had aged more than I expected. Some said she still blamed me. Some said she regretted it all. I stopped wondering which version was true. Regret doesn't undo harm. Accountability does. My life grew fuller in ways I hadn't anticipated. I built friendships rooted in honesty rather than obligation. I dated slowly, carefully, choosing partners who respected boundaries instead of testing them. When people asked about my family, I told the truth without drama. We're not close, I'd say, and that was enough. There was power in not over-explaining. I noticed something else too. The moment I stopped protecting people who hurt me, others began trusting me more. At work, in friendships, in my community. Strength, it turns out, is contagious. So is clarity. I no longer romanticized endurance. I didn't admire people for how much pain they could swallow. I admired those who knew when to walk away, sometimes late at night. I imagined an alternate version of my life where I'd stayed quiet, accepted the loss, rebuilt slowly, and told myself it was the price of peace. That version of me would have survived, yes, but she would have taught her son that injustice is something you tolerate when it comes from familiar faces. I was grateful I chose differently. Peace built on silence is fragile. Peace built on truth is solid. And every time I checked the account set aside for Noah's future, every time I saw the balance grow through careful planning rather than stolen effort, I felt grounded. Not triumphant, grounded, like someone who had finally planted her feet in a life no one else could. Rearrange without permission. If there is one lesson this story leaves behind, it's this. Revenge doesn't always look the way movies promise it will. There were no viral moments, no dramatic public apologies, no instant justice. What there was instead was resolve, paperwork, patience, the willingness to endure discomfort now, to prevent a lifetime of quiet suffering later. I didn't ruin my family. I revealed fractures that were already there. I didn't break trust. I exposed who had already shattered it. And once I understood that, the guilt I'd carried for years dissolved. Today, my life is quieter, stronger, and intentionally smaller. I guard my peace fiercely. I don't share access to my finances, my time, or my heart without trust earned over time. When people test boundaries, I no longer negotiate them. I enforce them, and that alone has saved me from repeating the past. Noah once asked me what revenge really means. I told him the truth as simply as I could. Revenge isn't about hurting someone back, I said. It's about making sure they never get the chance to hurt you. Again, he nodded thoughtfully, then went back to packing. As I watched him, I knew that whatever anyone else believed about my choices no longer mattered. That people who benefit from your silence will always resent your strength. Let them. Strength doesn't ask for permission. If you're reading this and standing at the edge of a decision that scares you, whether to confront, to walk away, to speak up, or to finally protect what you've built, know this. Choosing yourself is not cruelty. It's clarity. And clarity is the beginning of every real ending and every real beginning. My story didn't end with a ruined family or a dramatic reconciliation. It ended with something far more valuable: freedom, and that is the kind of ending no one can ever take from you again.